In this video, I'm going to give you a tour of the Unity 3D interface. In this particular tour, we'll be looking at a 2D environment. However, please note that for a 3D environment, the user interface isn't any different. Okay, so for this walkthrough, I've just opened a project that I created earlier, which will give me something to be able to show you. So when you open Unity and you open a project, this is sort of what the screen looks like that you'll see. You can lay out these sections a lot differently, but for this walkthrough, I'm just going to show you the default interface that you will see when you open Unity for the first time. So probably the most important place to start is the scene view here in the middle. You can see that this tab here is named Scene, and over here you can see part of the game that I've been building. On this scene I can select things, and when you select something, it will show it as selected in this hierarchy view over here and in the inspector. So what does this mean? Well, the hierarchy is a list of all the objects that are within this scene. So if I was to select something else on here, you can see that it comes up as selected within the scene. The hierarchy can have parent objects that will show with a triangle next to them to show that they have child objects underneath them. So what are these objects? They're called game objects. In an entity component system, these are the entities. If you don't know what I mean by that, that's okay, we'll be covering entity component systems shortly. Just know that this is a list of all the entities in your scene, and it is hierarchical, so it can have a parent-child relationship. Also note that in this hierarchy view, if the object has black text, that means it is simply an object on the scene. If it has blue text, like all of these ones here, it means that the object is a prefab. And what is a prefab? A prefab is a game object that is saved to be able to be reused in other scenes and other places within your game. Okay, so that's the hierarchy. If I come over here to the inspector now, it's made up of a few parts. Right here at the top, you have the name of the object. You can set tags for the object, the layer that the object is located on. If it is a prefab, this is where you can make some changes to the prefab. All objects also have a transform component. So this is where the object is located on your scene, its rotation, and its scale. So if I wanted to move this gem upwards, I can grab the y-axis and simply move it like so. Any other components that this entity has will be listed down this section here in the inspector. So this is where you can make any changes to those components. A component may be a physics object, it might be a sprite renderer so you can actually see it on the scene. It could be a script or even a shader particle effect. Okay, so recap, the scene is a visual area you can edit in your game. The hierarchy lists all the objects that are within your scene, and the inspector shows all of the components that make up those objects. And they can be edited, and when you are even testing the game, you can make changes in there to see how those changes work straight away. Now, when you're within the scene area, sometimes you need to make some adjustments to things. So you can see at the top here, there's these tools. So the hand tool is a simple pan tool that allows you to move around the scene without actually picking up any objects. The move tool gives you some grips on the selected object, so you're able to move it up or down, left and right, just by grabbing on the handles. The tool next to it is a rotation tool if you want to rotate the object. The one next to that is a scaling tool if you want to make it bigger or smaller. And then there's a simple transform tool, so you can grab one of these corners and move the object around the scene. Or if you hold down V, you can grab a specific corner and snap it to another object. Okay, so that's those tools. So as you come over here, you'll see there's a play and pause button. If I was to hit play, it will run my scene in the game view. So in this game view, the game is fully playable. This makes it really easy to test and prototype your games. I can use the pause button to go back to my scene, but keep the game active, and unpause it as well. And I can hit the play button to stop it entirely. Please note that while the game is in play, any changes you make in the inspector area will not be saved. So as soon as you hit play again to stop it, all of these settings will go back to how they were the previous time that you press play. Okay, so moving over here, I mentioned before that you can change the layout, and in fact we will be doing this soon. But once you've done that, you can save a layout in this menu here, or even switch to a different layout. If you don't like the changes you made in your layout, you can always go back to default. Okay, now if we come down here, you'll see there's this project and console. So the project is your file storage hierarchy. When you create a game, it has an assets folder, and this is where you're going to put all your artwork, materials, prefabs, scenes, scripts, sounds, all of the resources that you're going to be using in your game. Then you can click on a folder to see what resources are within that folder. Then if you want to add additional objects to your game, just a matter of selecting something like one of your prefabs and dragging it into the game window. So that's added an extra object to the game. It's also added another object to the hierarchy. And because it's a prefab, it's brought across all of its components, which consist of a sprite renderer, a rigid body 2D, and a box collider. This here is what makes the object visible, and these two are for the physics engine. The console allows you to print out any errors or any notes that you want to make to debug issues in the game. You can print them out to the console and check that here while you're playing the game. Okay, so that's a very quick overview of all of these tabs here. Let's have a look into the menu items. So we have a preferences window. Under external tools, by default, you'll be using MonoDevelop as the code editor. But if you have something you prefer like Visual Studio or one of your text editors, you can come in here and change the default application or set it back to MonoDevelop. Under keys, you can change your shortcut keys. Under colors, you can change the color theme. If you find yourself making edits in the inspector while the game is running, you might want to change the play mode tint to something a little more drastic, like bright red or something, so that when the game is running, you're not tempted to make any changes and then forget that you made them. Under File, you can see how you can make a new scene or save the current scene. So what you can see here in the scene window is saved as a scene, which will look something like this in your asset hierarchy. So if I wanted to go away from this staging area and to one of my levels, I can click level 1. And notice that I've made some changes to the scene I'm in. So I can choose to save them. Okay, now I've opened up level 1. If I come up to edit, the main things you'll be using in here is the project settings. I don't want to go into them in more detail now, but it's just handy to know that they're there. And it is worth exploring them. You might find some really interesting settings, such as these physics 2D settings. So under assets, this is where you create things or load things that go into your assets folder in your project. So you can see I can create more folders, C# scripts, JavaScripts, scenes, prefabs, materials, animations, sprites, physics objects, GUI skins, all sorts of things. And with the currently selected object, I can reveal it in the Finder or in the File Explorer, depending on what platform you're on. I can also import one of the default packages if I want to bring in, say, the standard 2D assets. And that's all the important stuff. Just know that the assets folder relates to the assets within your project. Now the game objects menu relates to game objects in your hierarchy. So here's where you can create an empty game object if you're going to add child objects. You can select specific 3D objects and 2D objects to add to the scene, lights, audio sources, UI elements, particle systems, cameras, etc. The component menu. So as we talked about over in the inspector, components show up here. So you can either add new components by coming down to add component and working through the menu down here, or through this component menu up here. They're both mostly the same. Mobile input, we're not going to go over just yet. In window, so all of these tabs down here, if you're ever missing any of them, window is where you can reveal it again. And there's a lot of other different tabs in here as well, such as your asset store, audio mixer, animations panel, the animator, the sprite packer, lighting, occlusions. You can even change your layouts in here. Okay, so the Windows menu is all to do with these windows. And then there is the help menu. The Unity manuals are pretty good. Same with the scripting references. It's always good to use the check for updates button now and then to make sure that you're using the latest version of Unity. And there's also release notes so that you know what's going to be in the latest version of Unity. Okay, so that's a very quick rundown on the menu system. Once you get in and start playing with it and creating game objects, you'll soon become accustomed to it. Out of all the game engines I've worked with, Unity is definitely one of the most simplistic and beautiful ones. Everything is laid out perfectly to support a strong entity component system, and I'm sure it won't take you too long to get the hang of it.